Hello. Hello, hello. Good morning. It's February. Y'all, did y'all know it was February already? Cuz I swear it snuck up on me. Like I think that's pretty much the traditional adulting feeling um of of life. Like it's like these seasons, these months, they keep on happening very quickly. Very, very quickly. So, I'm just going to give it a moment here. Make sure I have my water. I'm still trying to I'm on the mend. This has definitely been a season of, I've been very open. If y'all take note of the new, what's it called? The thumbnail for the live. I've been kind of evolving into in my branding. I'm a believer of you kind of have to act on some things and see what works, see what doesn't work. And this season of my life, I feel like, in my own reflection, and being open about it is like I have to start bringing all these components to the forefront of like what right size perspective and perspective counseling values are, what it's based off of, because transformation is ultimately what that aligns with. So you may notice the new design has a key component to it is how. And I'm not taking credit for this. This is mostly inspired by the 12-step programs, given that my professional background is centered a lot in addiction counseling. That is my clinical specialty. So I'm a psychotherapist and with a specialty license in addiction studies. And how really is it's in the rooms. It is a acronym for honesty, openness, and willingness, or some version of that. And in the recovery community, those are like the pillars of how recovery goes. And so I really thought it would be a very good depiction for those, because my purpose is trying to get people to understand how to deal with the challenges, not only just of addiction, but being able to understand the perspective of someone who struggles with addiction, but then also being a person who's impacted by that. And then all there's so many things that intersect with how we exist in this world. So that's where I struggle to sometimes stay on topic, and things can get kind of loosely associated because it can get so broad very quickly, when we're talking about these things, and then how to apply them in your own life, specifically into your circumstances and whatever, because everyone's life is very, very different. But we all deal with very similar things. So for me, as a person leading people in this journey of healing and understanding what you want your life to look like, I think a lot of it comes down to this how concept, how to align with transformation. It requires honesty, openness, and willingness. So when we talk about my transformation, those were like really pivotal in how I approached the journey that I took. And it also infused itself into a lot of other things and projects that I work on. And kind of what I wanted to talk about today is, because it is February, it's Black History Month. I want to infuse Black history and mental health awareness just for today's version, and a little hopefully throughout the month. I am also kind of on a mission for y'all to tell me what is it that you need from me. As a therapist, I can speak on a lot of things. I've had to become versed and have kind of a general baseline knowledge of a lot of things, from religion to sexual education to food to nutrition to spirituality. And I literally kind of signed up for my transformation, and practicing what I preach was trying all the different things in life that we're exposed to. And that has been it's honestly, it's been very frustrating in some ways because I don't really ever get to truly like just believe in one thing. I can if I want to, but I also have been exposed to a lot of great perspectives of this world and how healing and how transformation can happen. But what I do believe in is my specialty and the things and the principles that in life, the life that we all, in the society that we live in, we have to have some respect for in order to be able to coexist with each other. So a lot of that comes down to the recovery principles of, um, emotional regulation, communication, um, relational management in a lot of ways. But definitely starting with how the individual needs to do some work. We're part of the system. The system and needs to change for sure, but we're our own interworking. We're our own system, and we have to understand how this works before we can take on the bigger system. At least that's what I promote for people. Or if you want to do both, which I am notorious for trying to do both, is being able to manage how, because I couldn't just, you guys have heard me say before, I'm a provider. I couldn't stop providing just to take care of myself and it be like an all in, take a vacation, go get my shit together and come back out. I had to do these things over time. And what I found by implementing a lot of these recovery perspectives and healing and therapeutic perspectives from my world of therapy, I've been able to create change in my life that's allowed me to sustain in really high stress environments and deal with things that actually, and I've been able to use that to help me build more of a stress tolerance. So therefore, we can go further because these problems that we face, they don't just stop. I'm getting a little bit on a tangent right now, so I'm going to kind of bring it back around here. This was all just because of the new thumbnail, right? Of the new thumbnail when it comes down to like how do we create and align with transformation is that we have to start with being open, with being honest and being willing to be uncomfortable. So there's a lot of different interpretations of where those values can be placed, but I definitely think they are, and I had kind of forgotten, to bring those to the forefront when I created this live, which is one of, I'm not gonna say many, but like a couple of lives that I will be scheduling to help kind of spread a message about what's going on and what I think as, as a therapist who's clinically trained to see things from a certain perspective to try to help other people kind of do that on their own. And hopefully it can help little by little. So to kind of get in where this intersects, just a couple of things. So with what I said in there, I am dependent on you guys and whoever watches this to like, what do you need from me? I am one of those type of people where it's like, if I don't know the answer, I either know someone who knows the answer or I will find it myself. Or I might have some kind of like general knowledge of how to piece things together and how to look at something and be able to figure out how to find a new solution that maybe we didn't even consider. But I need your feedback in order to do that. So I'm putting out in my next blog post an opportunity for y'all. Tell me what it is that y'all need, whether it's you want me to speak on certain things, because I got lists for days of like, I can talk on this, I can talk, but this is not about you just hearing me. This is about us hearing each other and also having someone with some clinical perspective and a subject matter expert to speak on certain things. So whether that's you sending them to me and like, hey, could you say more? I can speak about it generally to be able to get out, get the education out there. But it also kind of helps you guys understand a little bit about like, what is it that you should expect when it comes to getting mental health and being aware about mental health, right? So 10 minutes in, I'm like, okay, get to it, Sarah. So I was listening to this podcast this morning, and I will link the podcast. It's called Very Bad Therapy. Actually, one of my supervisees, they sent it to me, and gratefully so, because a lot of times I live under kind of a rock when it comes to reality, television, what's going on in the media, and sometimes for new things. So this is where I love to learn. So they sent it to me. It's called Very Bad Therapy. And I happened to get stuck on this one episode, or just this one episode stuck out to me. It's called Enlightenment is Not a Treatment Goal. And I've been listening to it, and I really appreciated this episode. So I'll link it. It's about an hour long. So it's taken me a little bit to actually finish the whole episode, but I finished it this morning, and I was like, okay, this is why I can't always have a plan. Because sometimes I'll be like, I'm going to talk about this. And then I hear this one thing, and it's like, this is a message that actually needs to be heard. So I was listening to this episode this morning, and they were talking a lot about how the influence of other people, like religion, and more extreme like perspective of certain constructs like religion and spiritual. It's not really a construct particularly with spirituality, but being so full double down and being like a higher power is going to save the day. It is so influential, and I'm talking about some controversial topics right now, so please, provide me your feedback on what y'all think and how I do. But we can't be fully all in on one aspect of what goes into humanity. Spirituality and religion is very necessary. And for my own personal background, I struggled with my spirituality, and I grew up Catholic, not very rigid Catholic, but just that was the exposure. And then I had, some life circumstances that really disconnected me from what a higher power was. And then working in my profession, there's a lot of people who want nothing to do with a higher power. So trying to learn how to navigate and communicate a faith that they have to recover, but then also at the same time having no connection to my own spiritual system to tell them, like, why is that important? But also relating to the fact that it's not everything that of importance to depend on, because that higher power is it's broad. And where I feel like this intersects into, because I mentioned Black History Month, in my conversations about race, which I can dive deeper into, if you followed me for a long time, you know that I talk a lot about this and our relationship with race. But where it intersects with Black History Month is that it's been commonly shared with me that in the Black community, and if I look at other just communities in different cultures, religion is very heavily depended upon to be what helps us in mental health scenarios. So people coming to therapy to exclude the conversation about either spirituality or religion, and helping someone understand if they don't have a background with it, sometimes bringing that into the conversation can be important, because that's also going to help them with that client with what it is they need eventually. It may not be the highest priority thing, but for me as a clinician, I think it's important for people to consider that as they change and time passes, their experience with faith is going to change as well. So excluding that all the time may be detrimental. However, on the flip side, being so dependent on and being from a community that it's like, this is a common one I've heard in sessions, is just pray it away. Just pray, it'll be okay. Just pray, force today. I think I was just rhyming there because I was hearing it. That is very detrimental to a human experience, in my opinion. This is why this is not therapy. These are therapeutic conversations, hopefully. But that is detrimental to the human experience because the human experience is more than just spiritual. It is mental and physical. You have physical reactions and physical signs in your life that are telling you how and what to pay attention to and what needs to be paid attention to in this world. And excluding those is why therapy exists. And I think people are, I feel like I'm sure people in the news have actually started to call it some kind of awakening. I think it's a lot of is, we're realizing the magnitude of suffering, and there has been a lot of loss in this period. I mean, the last 2 years in itself it's a whole, that's like generational, like loss. But just this season, there's a lot of the people that I talk to have and connect with the concept of loss and suffering just in the last few months of this resurgence of COVID, of layoffs and the fear of recessions, or of a recession. And specifically, communities of color are going to feel this burden a lot. And there is a significant gap in practitioners and clinicians of color that people are not going to, someone of color may not relate to me right away. Like, I will present as someone who does not understand or cannot understand what it's like to go through that. And that's where I want to just kind of tie that into mental health awareness and Black History Month, and just the topic of racial trauma and the intersection of how we can't fully rely on just a spiritual faith system to get us through. It's necessary and it's better than nothing at all. But if you're one of those people that have been in an oppressive religious situation, you're going to kind of be left out in the, like, well, how the hell do I deal with this? Exactly. And that's where kind of therapy can kind of swoop in and help you understand, what do you have available? What resources are there to deal with what you're going through? Because every individual does not necessarily relate the same. I've worked very well with some clients within other communities and different cultures. I actually think that has been not only a strength of mine as a practitioner, but I think it's a strength for what and how people are exposed in therapy to different ways of coping. And then just because we look the same doesn't mean that we think the same. And so that's where differences can be healing, but also needing to honor the space where there are people who need to see themselves and a version of themselves to feel more comfortable. And that's okay. The big kicker here, and what I wanted to make sure y'all heard on this, is that when you are selecting a therapist, if you are finally at that point of like, okay, I need to invest in myself, I need to take care of myself, is that if you ever feel like there is a no comma but is what I call it, but it's like there's like, you can't say no to this therapist without feeling like there's a relief of discomfort and it makes sense to you, then you are you're not in the right place. You should have free will and consensual ability to come and go, talk about what you want to talk about. I'm the type of therapist that I will challenge you just a little bit when you present that, just to make sure that there is an awareness of comfort zone. And whether or not, it's kind of like if you go, how I tell my clients, if you go to the gym, why you hire a trainer is because they know the layout, they know the body to the point where they know how to build your muscle in a certain way, but they're also there for accountability, for you to experience that challenge and that potential barrier before you go up in weight. But they're also there to challenge you and then be there to make sure that you get through it okay. If you are hitting that barrier with your therapist and you still don't feel okay, that's a sign. And that's where I want y'all to go listen and try to commit to some time to listen to this episode of Very Bad Therapy, because it speaks on those very new modalities in the spiritual world, which I'm actually quite interested in, like hypnotherapy, Reiki. There's a new one called Psyche, I believe I'm doing a little bit of research on. And this particular episode talks about soul therapy, and there's practitioners who are kind of venturing out of the traditional model of psychotherapy because of their own experiences in the influence of spiritual practices and all the different practices, which is absolutely fine. I'm actually technically one of them in some ways when it comes to me doing my own coaching program. However, you have to understand and meet and eventually learn whether or not that person is giving you that consent for you to have the experience that you need to have, that you want to have, and that's safe for you. If they are telling you that it's like, oh, no, there's only one way of reaching enlightenment, red flag, get out. Like, if they are not able to stop and have a conversation with you about your discomfort, now there are also limits to that, because on the other side, and what I really liked about this podcast episode was that they talked about how what did he call it? I don't know. I can't remember exactly what he called it, but there's responsibility on the side of the client to ask the questions from the therapist about, like, what's my background? What do what's your style? How do you typically do that? But at the same time, as a therapist, you guys don't know. Like, I can't assume that everyone knows how to ask those questions and what to ask. So that's really what I'm trying to do with this platform that I'm creating, is giving y'all the insight and the education you need to navigate the inner workings of your own healing. And if you use a therapist and you go to therapy, then to be very intentional about how you do that work, because sometimes it can be so broad, as just like you've maybe possibly gotten lost in this whole conversation. It's so general to the point where it's difficult to apply and to see how to apply in your life. That's why perspective counseling or perspective is so important to me, is because if I'm going to therapy for, like, dealing with anxiety and, some depression or just some unhealthy relationship dynamics, I'm probably not in a very clear place or a clear head to trust my own intuition, to trust my own decision making, and therefore my judgment about how I engage and how I ask questions is going to be a little challenged. I can't think of the word, but that's really all we're doing in therapy, is like, how do we restore a solid trust within the individual for them to understand their own experience, their own needs, and then ultimately broaden that to the rest of their system that they live in, and regain a balance. And some of that balance, and for me, that imbalance came internally, not just emotionally, but because my health was compromised. Sorry to jump ship to another topic real quick, but just follow me here. Is like, this is where the physical, everyone's heard, when it comes to health, you got the mind, body, spirit, which is good, but so in my clinical training, it's biopsychosocial. So we have to really, from a medical model standpoint, take into account the bio. So there's your physical. What is naturally happening against our own control of how the body regulates, that's built on, that could be influenced by stress, by disease, by genetics, by other things. So that's where I've had some passive medical model training and exposure to different, like, trainings that I put myself in to understand the inner workings of the physiology. And more specifically, what I look at is like the physiology of stress and what stress produces in the body, right? So then we got psycho. So that's the mentality, that what is going on in the psychology and the experiences that you've had within your life that also influence the bio, they influence the physical. And then social is the inner workings of the network and the environment that you live in. That's not completely directed towards spiritual, but if I extend it, I can have this gift to kind of relate things. But what is this popping up here? Spiritual and social go hand in hand, because usually if you are in a spiritual realm or a phase of your life, you are within and connected to a community of people that way as well. So you kind of, social and spiritual do go together in that way as well. Let me take a moment here because I'm like throwing a lot at y'all. So the thing about these lives as well, I know that I go live not primarily for the reason of engagement. It's actually to build my my video platform on YouTube and giving the projects that I'm working on, which I'm not quite ready to debut quite yet, but they require content. So this is me really just trying to get y'all some content to comment on later. So if you're able, you watch this video or you listen to this audio or video later, that just, start to collect some reflections about what does this bring up for you? It can be in agreement, it can be in disagreement. And so when I say feedback, that's kind of the feedback that I am looking for in terms of engagement. So therefore I know how to, can't address everyone's needs, but I want to make sure people have a unbiased, well-rounded, honest, open, and willing conversation with someone myself, who can give them the guidance and the consultation of how to get to where you need to be to meet your needs, to improve your life. And to align with that transformation. So you see how that all comes full circle. It gets broad. I could probably use a lot less words. I saw this meme the other day about how men talk in straight lines and women talk in circles. I've met other men that say use more words and talk in circles too, so I don't really subscribe to that 100%, but it also makes a whole lot of sense. I was like, yeah, I let's talk about it all, and then I bring it back full circle. So let me just make sure so we talked a little about let's kind of tie back in the Black History Month and how do they intersect, right? We were talking about a little bit more of I think for me, the best way that I can narrow it down is when you go to a certain extreme. Everyone has free will. You can believe what you want to believe. I would encourage anyone to look at, are the consequences, whether positive or negative, are they in line with what you want the outcome to be, whether it be a conversation that you had or the application of your belief system? Are you getting the results that you want in your life? And if you're not, take a look at that, because there's something off. Not necessarily something wrong, but there's probably a barrier that you weren't aware of. And so anytime that you're in a place of extreme, there's a limitation, there's an imbalance, and a potential bias that's not being seen. And so when we're talking about, I really want to focus this just of all the things in Black History Month. I don't want it to be potentially negative, but I think it's a very large undertone to what has been going on just in the last few weeks, and that is the influence of trauma and the concept of vicarious trauma just through media. The murder of Tyree, of course I'm going to forget his last name. How the forget? We all know the murder of Tyree at this point. If you don't know, go on Instagram, Google Tyre, and it will pop up. You know what? I actually need to Google his name because it is bugging me that I do not have Nichols. There's Nichols. Duh. And then there was another recent news post about a double amputee that was killed too, with a lot of just information, honestly, that I'm not going to speak on the event. I'm just going to speak on the impact, because I don't know the details right now of what caused those things. I just know that they've happened. And when things happen, it affects people. And I made a post on my story the other day when I first learned about Tyre Nichols. about be respectful for sharing the video of his murder. And I still stand behind that, because what I guess the only other word I would want to use instead of respect would just be consideration. What it take into some consideration when you share a video of someone being assaulted, of someone being hurt, you pass that energy, you pass that experience, you pass that trauma to someone who may have a connection to it, who may have an experience with it, and it will carry through all of the different systems that we're connected with. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail because this is going to be my moment of sending the spotlight to a professional that I highly respect, who is a therapist of color. He's a really good therapist, and he's a male therapist too, which is like, I call him, I have this relationship, but he's like a unicorn in my field, because he is going to be able to relate to people, and to the people who may not have been able to relate to therapy before. He's going to be able to do that. And I have the honor of being able to help contribute to his professional expertise, as well as, like, his influence on mine. Like, he holds me accountable to growth in this topic, because I chose to talk about some really challenging things. And like, we're having a conversation, actually, who I'm talking about, his name is Blaise Harris. He is the dope Black therapist, and he was interviewed by the local news, who did a story on this, which I am going to link, and I'm also going to send out in my most recent blog post, that he speaks to this very, very well. So I want y'all to watch that, because it is really important for us to understand. And especially, this is where I am going to speak, especially for white and Caucasian presenting people. It is very important for us to understand the impact of these events happening. You can have an opinion on it, however you want to share that. Again, your own free will, just like this is how I'm choosing to share mine. But if we do not have some consideration, we, including myself, to the impact and the influence of us and how we educate people about these things happening, we could be doing some damage. We could be part of the problem. And I've been part of the problem before. There's my honest openness and willingness. I will tell you, I have been ignorant of my privilege to an extent that was ignorant. Like, I don't, there's a degree of ignorance that I'm sure I still have, because I don't know everything. But there was a degree of ignorance that I had in various points of my life that influenced how I can and I should talk about certain things. And it can leave you can't, first of all, you can't be perfect. You can't please everyone. And it's not even about pleasing. It is more about being considerate to the impact that having these types of conversations have, and how not having them, specifically, how not having conversations about our relationship with race as white people, as like, because I don't know about anyone else, and y'all can leave your comments about this. I never had that kind of conversation up until the last couple of years. I have a whole degree. I have a graduate degree in social work, which is, if I look back at like the curriculum, they were teaching us about social justice and racial injustices and inequities in the world, but I didn't get it. It really did not absorb into my brain until after I started handling my stress and my anxieties that I had, as that honestly came, I'm not going to get too far into this, but they came from being exposed to systemic oppression that I didn't even see, because I was just surviving. didn't take a moment to go to therapy. I did not take a moment to get perspective until one day it just kind of clicked. I was like, oh, yeah, I do this. Maybe I should take a look at that. And it had to require a moment of honesty with myself, openness to what I did not know, and a willingness to be vulnerable as hell. Because it is not comfortable. I will tell you, to have some of the conversations that I do and to be told about myself as a white woman and what I can and can't be talking about, or what I should and shouldn't know, it's not comfortable. It's also not comfortable to lead those conversations. But one of those has a different impact than the other. And the impact that I want to have in my world, in my lifetime, in my legacy is the one where I'm uncomfortable doing things intentionally and leading people to a new way of living. So that's really how you align with transformation. Comes back down to what you're willing to talk about and what you're willing to push past in terms of the emotional suffering and the emotional struggle of having difficult conversations and doing the hard things, saying the hard things, admitting that, I really didn't see how this was about me, but I can see how it is about me and what I have to do, right? So I hope that makes sense for people, but I would love to go into it more depth or have more responses to, some of the things I just said. But I really want this particular talk to have you kind of reflect on, how does Black History Month actually affect you, whether that be from a standpoint of lived experience of being Black in America, or whether you're white and whether or not you have, what is your experience of bias of racial experience. Because for me, I actually had quite a few experiences that formed my relationship with race, and that actually were counterproductive. They were like good, they had the pros and cons. It was bittersweet of like being treated a certain way at an event, but not honoring my own experience made it really uncomfortable for me to talk about, which reinforced that bias of ignorance, of unwillingness to talk about it and open up about it and be honest that, that was tough for me. If we do not include and hold space for everyone's experience, particularly, this is my belief, is that we're not going to get very far in being able to do something differently when it comes to how this generational trauma of racial inequity and oppression continues on. And it's going to keep getting masked within these ebbs and flows of stress and exposure to these really stressful occurrences. For some people, it's an experience of true loss, whether it's because you're related to the victim or you have a relational experience with the victim because he looks like you or she looks like you. Or if you're white and has nothing to do with you, and it's just really freaking sad to continue to watch this happen and for it to go unaddressed. Now, just to speak to my philosophy, this comes from me as a therapist, because I've had a lot of experience working with people outside of the racial justice topic for a moment who are unexperienced in the world, and talking about it is enough. Talking and listening to even this live is enough for you to find an alignment with how you figure out how you want to contribute to the cause of justice, of social justice, of racial justice. It is enough, because what I've found is that we tend to we generate fear, and fear is very stressful on the body, on the mind, and it's also stressful for other people to receive. If we breed fear into this conversation about what's good enough, what's not enough, and for this particular topic, then we're going to be, what's the word? It's not gatekeeping. It's like gate closing. We're going to be providing a barrier in how we're able, and other people of different backgrounds are able to learn about their contribution to the overall long-term goal, which is to rebalance, end racism, right? Or end suffering for this particular reason. So I have those conversations outside of this particular live, because now I'm going on 40 minutes. Ooh. I have those conversations outside of this particular platform, in my, I'm rebranding my podcast, Perspective Circles. But that's what Perspective Circles is really geared towards, is having conversations about our relationship with race and how we can learn from each other and the stories of experience. What I learned a term this week in a training that I was at was bonsai stories. I've heard that before. I just never really connected it. But they're just like mini stories about the process of experiencing, feeling, regulating, and healing. And when we can share those particular stories with each other, we can learn, because that's how, like, we say it all the time, children are like sponges. Adults are freaking sponges too. Whether y'all want to admit it, you can stay in your house all day, but you absorb what you're exposed to, regardless of how old you are. So please don't underestimate that, because you may become a little bit more solidified along the way of what you believe, but you still are, you're subjected to the people that you're around and the information that you're around. And that's kind of to bring back full circle to the topic of being exposed to trauma, specifically in light of Black History Month, because a lot of Black History Month is based on trauma. That we need to be considerate to how we talk with people, to how, as white people, as if you have a question or something to try to understand from a perspective of a friend who is Black or of another culture, to be respectful to that may be heavy for them. That is like you asking me when I'm kind of like off duty of like, hey, can we have a therapy session just real quick? That's technically you asking me, but it's also assuming it's you coming with your need as forefront versus giving me the option to say no. When you can sense that, like, I need this from you, and you're not able to kind of like take into consideration that may be a lot for the receiving end, that's what I'm saying considerate. So it's like when you share something, just try to be, I don't want you to like spin out in fear of like it's inconsiderate, but just be intentional about what your purpose is. How are you sharing this information? Are you honoring the experience of the people receiving it? That's what we're going for in therapy. If I could be a perfect world, in quotes, as a therapist, I would love to see people just be more considerate to the transaction of whether it's my experience to yours, my existence, my moment of what I'm going through to other people, because that's not something that people know always how to deal with, especially if it's an individual experience. I also want people to take into account that your experience is important. Your needs are important, but see if you can try to find other places to better understand without having to put the responsibility on someone who is already going through so much. Whew. So that's quite the live session. So I really appreciate it. I think if I'm looking at my notes here of what I wanted to talk on, I'll do a little bit of a recap, which is this intersection between Black History Month and mental health awareness. If you're ready to go to therapy, I highly commend anyone who is willing to take an honest and open approach to acknowledging, like, hey, I've got something I could do differently. Let's see what that could look like. That's what therapy is. But make sure that when you are talking with your therapist or a potential therapist or getting a recommendation, that you share what's important to you. If you do know, what's important to you to work on. And then you also feel like you have a very open, honest, and willing place for that. If they're not the right person for you, that you're not tied to that. No one is ever made to stay in a therapeutic relationship at any given point in time, especially if you do not feel like you are getting better or you see any relief to what it is that you're working on. Now, with a grace of like, it's naturally uncomfortable. So just take that into consideration. Like, if your therapist is not giving you anything to work on things, like, in other than just like saying like, oh, hey, go pray it away. No, that's not acceptable. We should be an unbiased space for people, for you to lead what's important to you. And we give you the guidance that is to educate you on how to make a decision for yourself and not implying our experiences over the experience of your own. And to be mindful of this, I mean, every Black History Month, I would prefer it to be something of true honor, which I think it is, but the reality, I think, and this could be my own opinion, so y'all just, share with here, but the reality is it's not just all an honor or a positive portrayal of overcoming. There is a natural attention to the fact that of oppression that is at play with Black History Month that is needing to be not only just discussed and talked about, but it's needing to be honored as well. There's anything that's positive does have its negative attributes, but it doesn't all have to be negative. And if we continue to avoid the negative, we create that it becomes our reality. That's just the reality. And like, little trade secret here as a psychotherapist, if you exclude emotions, they tend to be the leading factor in everything you do. So when you take into consideration change or you take into consideration of how to talk about difficult things and do difficult things, you can't exclude the negatives. You have to honor both. So yeah, I hope that I look forward to how you guys receive this message. And I'm looking forward to seeing how engagement grows into this platform. Like I said at the beginning, this this platform is about what people need and what kind of healing and influence my expertise can give. And if I don't know the answer, hey, maybe one day I'll be bringing people on this live with me. I think it's very possible, very soon actually, will I be bringing people on this live that can speak to things that in better forms than I am, which is why I'm going to link y'all with Blaise Harris, because he did a wonderful presentation and article of like, well, I guess it's a story. It's a news story. Like, he did this wonderful news story on just why it's important to be mindful of the media and being exposed to trauma during this Black History Month. So that is a quick little synopsis. So hopefully I can edit the end part, and if you want to know like what this 48-minute video is like, but definitely, leave your mark here. You can send us some feedback if you want it to be more private. It doesn't have to be on the comments here. It can be on my website. So take a moment real quick to kind of jump over to my website, check it out. You can learn a little bit more about me and how I am the way I am, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I could talk about myself and it would take way too long. I have a very interesting, diverse background. So y'all can read about that on my website. Be sure to follow us on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook for some more updates coming about some of the things that I've been working on and just trying to prepare people about how to be involved in a therapeutic community. Because whether you don't want to go to therapy or not, sometimes therapy is not the right place for people, but I'm trying to form a community that helps people be exposed to the things that you could be exposed to in therapy, so you can do a lot of that work yourself, but you can stay connected to the consensus of what's supposed to be happening. This is supposed to be an enlightening experience, not just heading towards enlightenment, but just learning more about what's going to work for you. So that's really what I'm trying to create. So make sure y'all stay in contact and connected, because that community is newly forming, and I'm excited about it. Like I'm doing something very new compared to what I'm used to be doing, but I also needed that change in my life. Like I have been behind a door and I have a lot of these conversations one-on-one with people, that it's a little stressful to think about having them in a grander situation, but I am looking forward to the challenge and to learning a lot of new things. So that's it for today. And I will talk to y'all next week.